This is Wheel Bearings. I'm Dan Roth from Forbes, and I don't even know what else to say every time I do that, but it just sounds, just say Forbes just leaves us all hanging. But anyway, yeah, I'm Dan Roth.
And I'm Sam Abu-Al-Samad from Southeast Michigan and Navigant Research and a bunch of other places.
I'm Rebecca Lindland from Rebecca Drives, currently in Newport Beach, California, and enjoying being out here.
Oh, Newport Beach sounds terrible. Why would you go there this time of year?
I'm struggling for sure. It's actually the weather's not been great. It's been a little bit cool, a little bit rainy, but I love being out here. It's just fun.
Well, both you, Rebecca, and you, Sam, have done some interesting stuff lately. Rebecca, you were at Heels and Wheels, and we'll get back to that. But Sam, you were just at the Belle Isle Grand Prix, so that's cool.
Yeah, I was there yesterday, and last week I was actually at Ford's City of Tomorrow Symposium in Los Angeles,
which I saw all over the social medias and everything else. So that seemed pretty interesting too.
Yeah, it was, and the weather was about the same as it has. Sounds like what Rebecca's been experiencing in Newport Beach, where kind of icky and not so warm and overcast and even some rain.
All of the above.
Yep.
But it's still California, right? So it's still lovely. I mean,
yeah. So you get terrible weather and all the downsides of living in California of high cost of living and traffic and congestion.
Well, the cost of living is only high because people want to be there.
I am currently enjoying the view from the Newport Beach Marriott with a view of the golf course leading out to the Pacific Ocean and Catalina Island.
Oh, the golf course. That's great. Look at all that destructive monoculture washing nitrogen-based fertilizer right into the ocean for algae blooms. Yeah. Excellent.
I don't even have to leave my house to see a golf course. I just look out my living room window. It's right there.
Well, some of us don't have that.
Yeah, I have neighbors that grow marijuana.
It's
great.
In your office.
Yeah. You have a big rock?
Exactly.
Anyway. So tell us a little bit about Heels and Wheels. It sounds like that was a different kind of event.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. So Heels and Wheels, this is about the 6th iteration, I believe. It's done by Christine Overstreet and her company. And it's really a gathering of a combination of women journalists, automotive journalists, and influencers. And it was a nice set, a mix of women. And one of the things that I'd never been before, so this is my first time. It was up in Santa Monica. And one of the things I really liked about it was that it was just a very positive atmosphere of new car, being able to see the new cars, being able to test drive them, in the context of talking to them about how we use these vehicles in our daily life. And like Cars.com did a really interesting presentation on how women look at vehicles and the buying process of women and how that is different. We also had presentations by Mazda. They were a big sponsor, and Nissan. And the funny thing was that FCA sponsored the breakfast, and they brought a minivan, and everyone's like, you got to be kidding me. But the reason they brought the minivan was because they have this fabulous Macedonian original female engineer named Alexandra, and I'm not even going to try her last name. And this woman is just totally badass. And she actually has been working on their hybrid powertrain for about 15 years now. And she's just absolutely fabulous. And so to hear her talk about her career at FCA, how she's progressed, how she's moved through the ranks. She's now the global, I have to get her exact title, the global head of hybrids, and just a really powerful woman. And she was a lot of fun. So it was just great to hear from her, to hear from some of the women in the industry. And then Haggerty was actually another big sponsor of this event. And they actually provided 3 different classic cars. They did a 1971 Ford Bronco, which I got a chance to drive. They had a Mustang there, and they had a Fiat Spider as well. And the woman that they had there, Tabitha Hammer, she actually went to a college called McPherson, which is the only college in the U.S. that has a degree in automotive restoration.
Yeah, that's a pretty well-known program. It's great
Yeah.
that I think Haggerty funds that or sponsors that too.
Right, they do. And so, again, there was just a tremendous amount of authenticity to the women that they brought to this event. And it was great. We got a chance to drive a bunch of cars. Aston Martin was there with their Superleggera, which, of course, is just to die for. And I got a chance to drive the Jaguar F-Pace. I was in the Range Rover Evoque, which I hadn't driven before, and I really, really liked that vehicle a lot. The new one, yes. Yeah. And then they also, Infiniti had the Q60 there, and I hadn't driven that before. I loved that. I think that was probably my favorite vehicle of the day. I don't know if you guys have spent any time in that.
The Q60, yeah, that's the one with the
Q60 Red Sport.
Yeah,
the Q60 Red Sport 400.
Okay, I haven't driven it in a while. That's the one that has the drive-by-wire steering, though, right?
Yes, it does.
Yeah, have they improved that at all?
I mean, granted, I didn't take it for very long. I probably had it for about half an hour of driving around, but I loved it.
Yeah.
I mean, it had a great exhaust note to it. It was a very expressive. I thought it was a very expressive drive. So I really liked it.
I do recall being really impressed with how it looks, both inside and out. I do think that it's a nice design exercise, and I can't remember how it drove off the top of my head, but that's with some of the news we're going to talk about coming up. I'm nervous for the future of Infiniti because they make some really interesting cars, and their coupes have been some of my favorites. So hopefully they won't go away, but we'll see.
Yeah, they're definitely facing challenges for sure.
Yeah. So, all right, well, maybe we should dive into some topics. We were going to talk about everybody's most hotly anticipated and super excited reaction to the Cadillac CT4V and CT5V. That's a little bit of sarcasm.
Yeah, just a little.
And FCA and Renault, rumors of a tie-up, or well, more than rumors, I guess, that they're trying to
propose
merge.
merger.
Yeah. And then the tariffs that are, I guess, sort of law by tweet. So we'll see what our economy does when they finally manage to ruin it with tariffs. But they have a really big implication, that the new tariffs proposed for goods coming from Mexico. That's a really big problem for the automotive industry. So if it happens, it's going to really take a bite out of auto manufacturers and consumers. So let's talk about the cars we've been driving. And Sam, you've been in the Lexus UX250h F-Sport, which is a lot of letters.
Yes, it is. A lot of letters and some numbers. And it's, this is Lexus's new smallest of their crossovers, a little bit smaller than the NX, but not a lot smaller. But the interesting thing was, I pulled it, parked it in the driveway and pulled my wife's Civic hatchback next to it. And it's just barely taller than the Civic hatchback. Most of the extra height that it has is actually from the two roof rails rather than from the roof itself. And, it got me wondering, it's like, what exactly is a crossover supposed to be anymore?
Footprint for EPA.
It's except, it's got a shorter wheelbase than the Civic, about the same width, so it's actually got technically a smaller footprint than the Civic. It's really basically just a very marginally taller, compact hatchback, which is I have no objection to that. Whatever you want to call it whatever you want. If people want to buy vehicles like this, then fine. They're really buying cars. And so, then the reality is that people are actually not shifting away from cars to crossovers because the crossovers they're shifting to are really cars.
They're big cars. Yeah.
They are.
But there's nothing wrong with that.
And this one even has tail fins. It's just like an old Cadillac.
Yeah, I have noticed that about the UX. It's like they're bringing back the fin, and so I'm curious for like the next generation if it's going to get larger and more pronounced.
Probably not. My guess is these are probably actually little aero appendages. I mean, they might be just a pure styling flourish, which would be fine, but they're probably actually there just to manage the airflow coming off the back of the car. I mean, they're fairly small, just about an inch and a half high. Tail fins on the rear tail lamps, and it's just a cool little touch. Overall, it looks fine. I don't mind the overall design of the thing. I think it's a decent implementation of the Lexus spindle grille. One area where it does differ in design really from the NX is at the front it's got the front fascia kind of goes down deeper. The NX, if you look at it in profile, the bumper seems like it's up higher, and then it cuts down. It's got an undercut there, whereas the UX seems like it has more of a deeper front air dam or front fascia. So it makes it look more like a car than a utility. And the one I drove was the 250h, which is the hybrid, and it's the F-Sport. And if you switch, there's a knob on the right-hand side of the instrument cluster to toggle it between normal, eco, and sport mode. And when I tried sport mode, I noticed something very interesting. It makes quite a bit more noise than it does in normal or eco mode, but it's all completely synthetic noise. It has it's this weird synthesized sort of kind of like an engine sound, trying to make it sound a little sportier, but it ends up just sounding a little weird. It's not 100% in sync with what the powertrain's doing.
I think there's a real market as we go forward with this kind of nonsense, because it's not going to stop.
No, probably not.
You could actually make customized download packs, so you can make the car sound like the Millennium Falcon or a TIE Fighter, if you wanted to, just because it's only going to play back over the stereo anyway.
Yeah, and you're going to have app stores in the car anyway to download stuff. So why not download sound packages for your car?
See, I think that's a new revenue stream. You can change all the warning sounds.
I love that idea.
Yeah,
I love that idea.
Right? I think it's a little hokey, but I mean, I would rather hear the engine. But let's just fully embrace the fact that there are external noise regs that keep cars quieter than they used to be. And so when we want to make them a little bit more thrilling, we have stuff like the little sound actors and the synthetic stuff that plays over the radio speakers only, because otherwise they wouldn't be legal to sell. So fine, we'll go with it. So this is a really hot segment too. The UX is actually not that big, right? It's kind of is it subcompact?
I think it's technically right on the line between a subcompact and a compact. I mean, it's bigger than something like the Encore. And like I said, it's almost exactly the same size overall as our Civic, which is a compact. So I think technically it's a compact. It's slightly smaller than the NX, but not by a whole lot. It's only a few inches difference. And it has one thing that as so many cars today do, it has a high belt line, which I find annoying. But it's not the worst I've driven, but it does have that terrible Lexus touchpad interface for the infotainment. Please just ditch that. The 2020, the refreshed 2020 RX actually adds a touchscreen for the first time.
Well, that's news within the last week or so. But this isn't the one with the little mouse, right? This is actually just the touchpad.
Yeah, they've gotten rid of the mouse. The mouse I actually thought worked better.
The mouse was okay. Yeah.
The touchpad just is not good. But other than that, the seats are really good in it. It's very fuel efficient. Got 36 miles per gallon. All in, the one I drove was about just shy of $42,000. So for the segment, for a Lexus, it's pretty good. It's a decent value. And it's got all-wheel drive with an electric rear axle. So there's it's on-demand all-wheel drive, triggering the rear axle through an electric motor. And then the front is just standard Toyota Lexus hybrid system. So it's a decent little car. And the UX, I guess, is actually for urban utility vehicle. So, it's a good size for driving in cities, as opposed to trying to drive something like a GX or, one of those other big monsters, or I forget what the other big utility they have. So it's a decent little vehicle if you're looking for something in this segment.
What do you two think of the styling?
Well, and the other thing is that it gets huge fuel economy, especially the hybrid version. So
yeah, I was getting like 36, 37 miles per gallon.
Yeah. So I think that's especially one of the appeals of the UX is not only the size of it, but it really cushions you and insulates you from any kind of spikes in gas prices. They estimate it. We had one at this event I participated in this week, Heels and Wheels, and they had one there, and I got a chance to drive it. But they provided a book for it, and it says 41 city, 38 highway, and 39 combined. And I mean, that's pretty fierce fuel economy for something that has a decent amount of cargo space. You're not gonna go cross country in it, but it does provide an opportunity for you to throw some friends or kids in and some stuff in the back.
On the other hand, our Civic gets 35 and has more cargo space and more rear seat room.
Yeah, but it's not a Lexus crossover.
I mean, no, but the thing is that this is a typical vehicle that is ideal for single women or empty nester kind of thing, but because it has luxury. And I love the Civic, don't get me wrong, I absolutely love the Civic, but this is a different kind of customer than is going after the Civic, and it has all-wheel drive. It's providing women an additional sense of security. This is a very, very female-friendly vehicle that I think is really important for Lexus. I like the NX a lot too, but this UX is just one more option that Lexus can offer women.
What do you two think of the styling?
I probably wouldn't buy it, but I'm not terribly offended by it.
Yeah.
It doesn't hurt my eyes. Let's put it that way.
And I think
I'm fine with it.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not a huge Lexus style fan anyway, but I do think that it's, again, for a lot of women, I think it provides a nice level of expressive styling without being without being polarizing.
Yeah. All right. I'm looking at it right now in the gallery from the consumer site, and from some angles it looks really, really interesting. Like there's a lot of just nice details in the surfaces and the shapes, and then from other angles it doesn't look so good. Like just the straight on profile, there's a lot of overhang on the front, but it is a front wheel drive car. So
it's not that bad. I mean, I'm looking at my photos right now, and the front overhang's not that excessive. In fact, on the NX, it actually it looks. I think the NX actually looks like it has more overhang because of when you look at it in profile, the way it comes down, there's more of a sloping cut. The front fascia of the UX goes almost straight down, deeper.
Yeah.
So it's got more of a car-like profile. And I think it actually makes it kind of de-emphasizes that overhang. But of course the thing that truly makes this a crossover is the matte black plastic wheel arch extensions.
Yes, of course. And then they'll come out with like a luxury model too. They'll come out with like the premier trim or something that they'll be painted. Body color.
You guys are so bitter sometimes.
No, we're jaded. There's a difference. So you're never really going to look at your car sort of like flat on any of the sort of views, right? You don't normally look at it like straight head on, straight profile. And those are views that tend to really flatten it out. So the other views of it, like it's interesting. Like I said, I think it looks really good. I really like the sort of the chamfer that it has over that front wheel arch. That because they're
kind of a Marcello Gandini look.
Yeah, it just immediately throws a shadow because there's a hard crease there before the wheel arch, and it just that kind of stuff. We're getting into this age of design where there's lots of lines and sort of aggression in the design, and certainly this is a little bit more aggressive, and that's Lexus's style. than in the past. It almost looks like a manga version of a car. But, I think seeing it in person, I haven't really paid attention to them. So I'd have to actually see if I've seen one in traffic. I want to see it and see how it plays in the real world. But I can't say that it looks bad. It's just certain views I think don't flatter it.
Yeah, I mean, there's certain angles to what. Oh, go ahead, Rebecca.
No, I was just going to point out the fact that I think that this vehicle really reminds me of the Infiniti QX30 in a lot of ways.
Okay.
It's that same kind of mix between a hatchback and a crossover. But the QX30 doesn't get nearly the fuel economy that the UX does. And again, for a buyer that this is targeted for, somebody who is a bit more budget conscious but still wants luxury, that can be a real deal breaker. That can be, there's a big difference. The best it gets is 2433, which is a big difference.
Yeah, the QX. It's funny, when I went on the drive for the QX a couple of years ago. It was. I was looking at the specs. It's almost exactly the same size as a Mazda 3. And if you get the QX30 Sport version, so the Sport trim actually sits a little bit lower than the other two versions. So it's also exactly the same height as a Mazda 3 hatchback.
That's really funny.
Yeah.
Oh, you know what? That's the QX is the same as the Mercedes GLA, right?
Yes, it's built by Mercedes and it's based on the GLA platform.
Right. And so the first GLA I had as a media car was a GLA 45 AMG. And I was like, this is a fantastic hot hatchback. And I realized it's supposed to be like a pseudo crossover. I was like, oh, well, it sucks as the GLA 250, but the AMG is good.
But again, this is designed, I really do believe that these are more oriented towards a luxury buyer who is, I think, on the more feminine side. That's just my feeling on it, or at least a smaller household.
No, I think I'll agree with that. And I think that if you were to look around and see the majority of people who are driving an NX even, it probably does. And even if they are RX, like those have been popular with women. And there's nothing wrong with that. Like, dudes, we have our own cars.
Hey, right. they're a bigger market than men are. I mean, there's more female car buyers than male car buyers. So
definitely more influence as well.
Yeah,
that's right. They influence the male car buyers as well. If you're buying as a family situation. So you just stepped out of that, Sam, and into
another hybrid utility vehicle.
Well, this one's a PHEV, so it's a little different.
Yeah, so I got into the Range Rover plug-in hybrid, which was introduced at the at New York, the New York Auto Show, and it's a Range Rover. If you've seen any Range Rover since 1970, you will immediately recognize this as a Range Rover, but a modern one, and nothing wrong with that. I mean, it's a good classic look. Although, the fake plastic vents on the front fenders, I think they could probably lose those. But aside from that, the rest of it, it's a good look, for a big, tall, luxury sport utility vehicle. And Range Rovers have some serious off-road chops. I mean, these things can go anywhere pretty much. This is pretty much, if you put the right tires on it, this thing could probably, follow a Jeep Wrangler just about anywhere. But this is the first plug-in hybrid version. It uses the 2-liter Ingenium 4-cylinder turbo that you can find in a lot of Jaguars and other Land Rover products, paired with a 14 kilowatt-hour battery pack and an electric motor. Unfortunately, during the time I had it, this vehicle doesn't go on sale here till the fall, and so this is a pre-production model, and it also had a pre-production charging cable. And so I had some issues. Apparently, I guess when you plug it in, it sends out the charger sends out a signal to the circuit, to check for ground and make sure everything's got, properly grounded before it starts charging. And, it's for safety reasons. But I guess there's some calibration issues with some of the pre-production cables. And so every time I plug this one in the garage, it would trip the GFCI outlet immediately. And so I could not actually charge it at home. I did take it to a local charge point charger, public charging station, and it worked just fine. But I didn't stay long enough to give it a full charge. But I guess in Europe on the NEDC cycle, these things are rated at about 30 miles of electric range, and that's a pretty optimistic cycle. So it'll probably get somewhere in the low 20s for when it's certified by EPA. But pretty much if you've driven any Range Rover in recent years, you will be immediately familiar with this thing, both inside and out. It's very luxurious inside, beautiful leather, great fit and finish. Everything is, put together really nicely. The pretty much the only real complaint I have about the interior is the screens that Jaguar Land Rover uses in most of their vehicles now, which are a bit too glossy, and they're also the type of display that if you're wearing polarized sunglasses like I do when it's sunny out, you get some distortion and that kind of rainbow effect that you get on certain LCD screens when you look at them at an angle through polarized glasses. And so that's kind of annoying. But it does have support for Android Auto and CarPlay now, as all other JLR products are starting to do. And even though I didn't charge it most of the time that I had it, just driving it as a hybrid with a 2-liter 4-cylinder, it was still getting 24 miles per gallon, which
that's pretty good for something so enormous.
A 3-ton luxury SUV, is very impressive.
Well, and its combined output is almost 400 horsepower. So that's not bad. Even the 4-cylinder, the engine alone is rated at 300 horsepower. So this is a pretty powerful setup, and it's got, even for a big vehicle like this, it has no problem accelerating. So, I think, by the time it goes on sale this fall, I think it should be an excellent choice for a lot of wealthy consumers.
And that's the one that's getting 31 miles in range. Is that the 4 PHEV or the? This is the standard Range Rover, not the Sport.
Okay. Although both will have the same powertrain.
Okay.
It's rated in Europe on the European drive cycle. It's rated at about 30 miles of range, so it'll probably be somewhere in the low 20s when it's certified here.
So
that's still pretty good. You can get to and from the office for a lot of people.
Oh yeah.
Without, I mean, that's it's a good commute. Kind of arrangement.
You don't find any irony at all in the idea of an electric Range Rover, given the history of British cars and electric.
I've now gone through a couple of different plug-in electric vehicles, particularly from Jaguar Land Rover. I drove the I-Pace back in December out in California.
Yeah.
And I commented on this in the video I did with Leo Laporte. That yes, it is rather ironic that a company that had such a sterling reputation for electrical system reliability with its Lucas electrical systems, should now be building plug-in electric vehicles. But so far, aside from the charging cable issue, and this is, still a prototype part, everything else was fine. Everything worked. And, it's funny, back when when Jaguar launched the XF in about 2008 or so, that first generation XF, when I got in that thing and pressed the start button, and saw the little shifter rising up out of the console, and that's the same.
And the vents rotating.
And the vents rotating around. I'm thinking to myself, this is an English car, a British car, with British electrical systems. How is that going to be?
Well,
now.
To be fair, the XF was probably a British car with German electrical systems at that point.
Yes, it probably was. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's a good joke, but overall, how similar is this powertrain to the I-Pace Is it similar at all? Does it share?
Oh, the I-Pace is a pure battery electric vehicle.
I know, but did they basically like take that sort of architecture and plop it in here with an engine?
It's completely different. So this one, it's a front engine, longitudinal engine with an 8-speed automatic transmission, and the motor is sandwiched between the engine and the transmission where the torque converter would go. So it's a completely different layout. There's really nothing in common between this and the I-Pace.
Okay. It's a little weird question. I'm just looking at it going, did they learn anything and then bring it over? I'm sure they learned stuff.
Well, yeah, I think they've learned a lot about doing electrical systems in the last 15 years, especially under, during the time that they were owned by Ford. I think they got past a lot of that stuff. That's
true. It's some of that. I think that Jaguar was like Ford's first luxury purchase, and they fixed a lot of problems by being under Ford. All right, well, so when you hit it big in the lottery, it sounds like that's going to be high in your list of choices.
Yeah, I mean, this thing will be priced somewhere north of $100,000 when it comes out. I think they haven't announced pricing yet, but it won't be cheap. But it's if you're looking for a big luxury SUV that gets decent fuel economy, this is one to consider.
Okay.
So I'm looking at this site. Oh, it just flashed. Is that the Range Rover PHEV HSE? Is that what was the 2.0 liter plug-in hybrid electric? Because they've got a price of $95,000.
Oh, they have the pricing now. Okay.
$95,950.
Yeah.
Bargain.
So this was an HSE, the P400e.
Yeah. So it's coming in this summer.
Okay, when I looked at it before, they didn't have the pricing posted yet.
Well,
it's under the future vehicles.
They're going to be thick on the ground in Greenwich, I'm sure.
Yes, they are. And in Southern California, where I am as well.
If you're not driving a Tesla, you're definitely going to be driving a Range Rover.
Okay, that's true.
And I'm sorry. So to that point, I drove the Range Rover Evoque mild hybrid, the 2.0 liter. With the inline 4-cylinder. And that was really nice. I drove that. That has a 48 volt, 296 horsepower mild hybrid powertrain. Have you guys spent any time in that?
Not yet. I have one scheduled later in June. So I'll have one in a few weeks, but I haven't driven it yet. But I've driven the Wrangler with that 2-liter 48 volt mild hybrid system. Yeah. And it's a very good setup. Works really well.
Huh. Well, when you want something that looks like $1 million but costs a little less, Rebecca, you were driving the Kia Telluride.
I was driving the Kia Telluride,
and I also had that a couple weeks ago. After the last podcast, I don't think I've talked about it, but did you find that it generated lots and lots of sort of questions and conversation when you had it?
Well, remember, I live in Southern Connecticut and nobody talks to each other.
That's true.
But it definitely garnered a lot of looks.
Yeah.
And I drove it down to towards the Jersey Shore, and I was at a rest stop over Memorial Day weekend, and there were definitely a lot of people that came over, wanted to look at it. I had actually bought some really cool pottery from somebody, and so she and I were putting it into the back, and this guy came over to help us out, and then he ended up crawling all through the vehicle.
Was it the cheese?
Really curious.
Was it the Cheesequake rest stop on the Parkway?
Yes. It wasn't Cheesequake. It was Monmouth.
Oh, okay. You were a little further down. Did you go see the horse races?
Yes. When the girl told me about it, I thought she misspelled cheesecake. I was like, what is this Cheesequake thing?
No, that's one of the stops.
It is one of the stops.
Yeah. So we also took it on a long voyage. We went actually down to see some family in Connecticut and drove it back. So we drove it, a couple hundred miles.
Yeah, likewise.
It's a fantastic family vehicle. It's really well thought out.
It was so nice. And I actually did a turn and burn. So I drove almost 2 hours down. I was at the rest stop for less than half an hour and 2 hours back. And I was not tired. The seats were incredibly comfortable. everything about it, I loved that vehicle. And 46,860 with destination, which is $1,000. I mean, that's just a deal and a half.
Yeah. So
it's crazy.
Did you have the SX?
Yes, I had the SX V6 all-wheel drive.
So that's the top trim.
Yeah.
And
it has the $2,000 the Prestige package as well. So the heads-up display, the Napa leather, the heated and ventilated second row seats. Yeah. So it was tricked out.
Right. And you look at that and you go, wait, how are they doing this for this price? Because you look around, first, the design is really impressive because it looks expensive, both inside and out. It's a very careful,
it's gorgeous.
Like very careful choices of materials and trim, and it seems well put together. And underneath it all, it's this sort of new look for Kia, and it doesn't necessarily mean that anything else is going to share this look. Kia seems pretty comfortable letting each of its models sort of have its own life. Mm-hmm. This is essentially a stretched Sorento that they have beefed up, and they made it a little bit longer, but it's not that it's unproven hardware. The 3.8 liter V6 has been around a while. It's their in-house transmission. It's everything is sort of stuff they already had. So they picked up and tweaked it and restyled it basically, but it looks like this all new thing that's just super impressive to behold. I was very impressed with the Telluride.
Well, so for contrast, the week that I'm out here in California, GM was kind enough to give me a Cadillac Escalade ESV. So this thing is gigantic. It is supersized for sure. And it's like $98,000. And I would be hard pressed to really, I think the only thing that the Telluride was missing is the cooler, which we did transport a 6-pack of beer in last night. So that was kind of a fun thing for the Escalade. But this Telluride was really, really impressive. I got 25 miles to the gallon and that was
really good.
That was right. It was 25.5 for that trip. Let me see exactly how long. It was 186 miles, 3.5 hours, and I averaged 25.5 miles per gallon. Yeah, that's amazing.
That's a little better than we did. Yeah.
In the Telluride.
Okay.
In the Telluride.
Yeah, if it was in the Cadillac, I'd be amazed.
Yeah. No, but that Cadillac, though, oh my gosh, last night I was accelerating onto the I-5, and all of a sudden I looked down and I was going 98 miles an hour. That thing has some serious power.
Gotta love a small block V8.
Exactly. It was amazing. But no, this Telluride, it's incredible, and I love it. It's made out of West Point, Georgia. It's just it's really, I think it's really well suited for the U.S., for families, and it drives so much smaller than it looks. And again, I went over the George Washington Bridge. I mean, I was in some hardcore traffic coming back because, again, Memorial Day weekend, but I never felt like I was hauling this big ass vehicle around. Like, it felt really nimble. It felt very, very steady, very secure. It wasn't top heavy. I cannot say enough about it. It was amazing.
Yeah, that was one of the questions that I had too from someone was like, does it drive big? And no, it was surprising actually how easy it is to park, how maneuverable it feels, because it is pretty large. I did find, like, we actually used all 3 rows. I mean, we put the dog in the back, but still, he's a person.
Absolutely.
So access to that 3rd row is never going to be that great in anything like this. Even that Escalade, for example, like, it's just the nature of if you need 3 rows, let's just get a minivan and be done. But it's about as good as it can be here, where the 2nd row seats will slide forward and there's enough of a passage because they've made it a little larger than the Sorento, which has a 3rd row as well, but it's a very occasional 3rd row. It overall, like, as a family SUV, with, you try to think of the competition. Even I'm trying to, like, an Explorer. An Explorer is going to be possibly more expensive to get it fully loaded at, than 47K.
Totally. I mean, that was the thing, is it was absolutely packed with everything you could possibly want in that thing. Oh, and my Android Auto worked absolutely seamlessly, which is not always the case. Even in the Cadillac, it just stopped working. People have told me that it's my cord that might be the issue, and I believe them, but it worked seamlessly. It was really impressive.
Yeah, I was quite impressed with it as well. So that one seems to be this, like, it's not even really a sleeper. It really stands out on the road. So it's another kind of effort from Kia that's going to, I think, get a lot more attention and sell pretty well.
It'll be interesting to see. I think I'm driving the Palisades in a couple weeks. Sam, are you on that event?
No, I can't make it to that one, but I'm going to be they're doing a regional drive here in Michigan in early July. So I'm going to drive it then. Okay.
So that'll be really interesting to see how that is.
How they're different.
And just right. And just for reference, Dan, the Ford Explorer, the Platinum, which is the top of the line, $58,000.
Yeah, that's so not worth it.
Yeah, starting price for the Explorer is $37,000 for an XLT.
That's the new Explorer or the old Explorer?
That's the 2020.
The new one.
So in Ford's defense, we haven't driven that Explorer yet, and I bet it's going to drive quite well.
I'm sure it will.
Yeah.
I'll be out on the West Coast the week after next to drive that.
See, so we'll pump you for information when you come back if you can talk about it.
Oh, yeah.
All right, so from the Telluride, I jumped into the very next week a $140,000 Mercedes-Benz G550, which is a really interesting contrast because the Telluride is equipped nicely. They've spent the money on finishes and materials. It has the flocked A-pillars and stuff, so it feels very luxurious. And then you get into something that's like true old school luxury, and you're like, okay, so this is obviously better, but it's not that much better that it's twice the price better.
It's not $100,000 better.
No,
yeah, it's 3 times the price.
Yeah, I mean, don't get me wrong. The G550 is incredible, and it's had a lot of work done to it. Like, it looks like the same one that came out in the late 70s. It's not. Like, I don't know if they've fully redone the frame, but there's been a lot of work.
It's all new this year or last year, 2019.
Yeah, it's totally different than it used to be.
It does stuff it's not supposed to do because at first it costs as much as a house, and driving it is kind of like driving your shed. But it'll do things like go around corners at kind of a brisk rate of speed, and it's not terrifying when it do that. And it has an independent front axle now that I don't think it had before. I think it had solid axles. But either way, like the suspension engineering on this is super impressive because I expected it to be much more sloppy or just not as capable as it is, and it goes down the road in a very composed manner, which damn well should for $140,000.
Yeah, exactly.
The interior, the last time I was in a G-Class was almost 10 years ago, and it was nice, but this new interior is amazing. And it really does feel like a handmade vehicle because it kind of is. It's got a lot of that sort of craftsmanship that's on display. The materials are really impressive, and you look at the way the body's assembled and stuff. It's a very impressive bit of craft from Mercedes. I just don't get why the popular use around here for a G-Class is to drop the kids off at the expensive suburban school. I don't ever see them off-road, and I also didn't take this off-road. I didn't want to get it stuck in the Worcester County hills out here, but it has.
You probably wouldn't have got it stuck.
That's true. It has G mode, which is it has 3 lockable differentials, which is like the mark of a serious off-roader. I also felt like it didn't have the right tires. I was like, I'm really not. I don't want to get in trouble with this thing. And it's just. If you're looking to be impressed, yes, it's expensive, but it's one of those few vehicles that really feels like for the price, you get at least every bit of of value out of that price. Like, it seems like it's worth it, and you're possibly like getting more value than you're paying for. That seems a little insane to say, but just what this thing can do and like how comfortable you are while you're doing it is sort of the takeaway from the G-Class. I don't know that I would recommend it as a SUV. It works. We certainly used it that way. It does feel a little ridiculous, especially the one I had. It was purple, and it had a polished brush guard on the front and the spare tire cover that looks like it came off a conversion van. So clearly, I'm not the demographic for this because I don't agree with the aesthetic choices. I don't like the new fascia that it's got. I think the front lights look kind of goofy. Whereas the old ones I think look really classy. But it's overall, like, it's in a different color. It would be understated. It certainly, it has that sort of that old world sort of, Benz thing where the doors just snick shut. They require kind of a hard pull, but the latches have that sound. They actually talk about it in the press release that has this, distinctive click sound. I was like, okay, that's something you guys engineered into it. So yeah, I mean, the G-Class feels like it should for the kind of money and the reputation that it has. So it was also a nice contrast with the Telluride to go, you could save a lot of dough if you wanted fuzzy A-pillars. You could just go with the Telluride.
But it's not an AMG G63.
No, the G550, you don't need the AMG. Not at all. No. There's plenty of power.
It's not a matter of need.
That's true.
It's not a matter of need.
If you're going to spend $140,000 on an SUV, you might as well, drop another, $8,000, and get the AMG.
Oh, it's only $8,000 more? That's such a bargain.
Yeah, it starts at $147,500.
Yeah, I mean,
and it has a handcrafted AMG 4-liter V8 biturbo engine.
So does the 550, I think.
No, it's not a handcrafted AMG engine.
Oh,
and you get the badging. Don't forget the AMG badging.
Right, which is super important.
And different wheels.
Different wheels.
Oh my God.
Well, these must be thick on the ground down in southwestern Connecticut too.
They are everywhere.
Yeah, they're everywhere out here by Boston. And there's a line of them at the snotty schools to pick up.
Oh yes, and Whole Foods and SoulCycle.
Right.
And Equinox. Gym.
Oh yes, there's an Equinox like right down the street from my work. It's disgusting. I parked it in the park. There's a G550, the one that's like taller, the 4x4 squared or whatever. It's a couple years older, but it's the one with the extra ride height and the wider axles and stuff. It's just
the GLE.
No, it's a G-Class.
Oh, still the G-Wagon. Okay.
Yeah, but I forget what it was. Anyway, it's a little bit extra ridiculous, and that one was bright yellow. And so I parked next to that, and I was like, well, this one's understated compared to that, even in purple. Yeah, I really wish they made like the original edition of this that has like 70 horsepower from a 4-cylinder diesel and a vinyl interior, or I'm sorry, MBTEX, and a manual transfer case and everything. Like, it probably wouldn't be any cheaper, but it would be much more in keeping. This was a military vehicle. This was designed for I think the Israeli military, and or it may have been designed for.
No, I think it was for the Swiss.
Okay. I forget how it went into production.
It was designed as a military vehicle, though. Yeah. Yeah,
and there was some infusion of cash from something that actually they decided to go into production with it. I think Steyr makes it, right? Still in the Magna Steyr plant. That's
Graz, Austria.
Right.
Magna Steyr. Yeah.
It's been around. It's been around for almost 40 years now. I mean, I hope I'm as expensive and well. I hope that people think I'm as valuable at 40 as this thing is. Anyway,
they will.
I've run out of superlatives. Let's get back to the Cadillacs that sort of landed with a flop.
Yeah, well, Cadillac unveiled them a couple of days ago here in Detroit. I was not at the event, but I talked to some people that were yesterday, and Cadillac's V-Series cars, over the last 15 years or so since the original CTS-V debuted, have built up quite a remarkable reputation, as some really impressive sports sedans, high performance sports sedans. The original CTS-V used the LT2, I think, Corvette engine from the C5 or the C6 C5.
C5, I think.
The C5 Z06 model. And then the second generation CTS-V got the LSA, which was a variant of the supercharged 6.2 liter V8 from the C6 ZR1 with 590 horsepower roughly. And then last time around, they bumped that up to 650 horsepower. These have been amazing cars. And then even the ATS-V that came out, the previous generation ATS-V that's going away now, that had a twin turbo V6 with 450 horsepower. These were really fast, they were really serious competitors for, the German M models and the AMGs and the Audi RSs. And then they brought out the CT4V and the CT5V.
What, you're not impressed with the CT4 with the Silverado engine in it?
No. Talking to some folks yesterday, it's apparently what Cadillac has done is they are completely revamping the V lineup, and there will actually be versions of the CT4 and CT5 that are significantly more powerful. But what these are is something more like what Cadillac used to call the V-Sport models. If you look at, AMG has their AMG Sport models. BMW has the M Sport. Audi has the S-Line models. That add some, little bit of styling flourish, maybe a little bit more power, but they're not the full horsepower variants. I don't know what Cadillac hasn't said what they're going to call the high powered variants of these things, but these two, the CT4V and the CT5V, Cadillac can't seem to figure out what their messaging is around these things. And introducing these first before they bring out the high end versions just seems kind of weird, because the CT5V, is only slightly more powerful than the standard CT5 with the V6. It's like, I think about 350 horsepower.
No, I think it's 300.
Or it's 335.
335. Yeah. Which is weird. Like, that's the 3 liter twin turbo, and that's all it's making. Like,
yeah,
that's not any horsepower to sneeze at, I guess. But in this day and age, like, I'd expect the twin turbo V6 to be making like 400. If you're going to call it a V,
Yeah, I mean, you look at Lincoln, the Continental and the MKZ with the same size 3 liter twin turbo V6. They're putting out 400 horsepower from that engine, and the
CT4V is only 320.
Yeah, well,
it's a 2.7 liter 4-cylinder turbo.
Yeah.
It's the base engine from the Silverado.
Right. I see that. Yeah.
So, remember a couple of weeks ago when we were talking about how Cadillac they've not been good brand stewards? This is just another example of them crapping all over every little bit of credibility they have built over the last 15 years. Just calling these cars Vs and not delivering on the promise or the implication, I guess, that V moniker has carried,
Right.
It just, I don't know, these cars, I guess too, like, I should take a step back and try to wrap my head around what the CT5 and what the CT4 actually are, because they've revamped their lineup. The CT4 is basically an ATS replacement, right? Where the CT5 is the CTS replacement, or is that?
Yeah. Okay. It's actually, the CT5 is actually a little bit smaller than the CTS. It's shorter overall. It's got a longer wheelbase, but it's shorter overall than the CTS was. And what they're doing is they're kind of trying to spread out the lineup a little bit more, get a little bit more of a gap between the CT6 and where the CTS was.
Yep.
They felt the CTS was too close to the CT6 before, so they made the CT5 a little bit smaller, and then the ATS and the CT4 are pretty close in size, but the real problem, and the CT4 looks okay. I mean, it actually doesn't look that dramatically different from an ATS, but the whole strategy, or what trying to explain what is the strategy is where they're having a problem. They haven't really been able to articulate what it is they want to do with these models, and why are they taking the V, what was this really high performance sports sedan, and applying that branding to what is just a so-so sedan.
I'm still trying to figure out why they have put the trouble I'm having with Cadillac is why are we even dealing with sedans right now? Where is all of your effort with crossovers? And I know we just saw the XT6 debut, but that also seemed underwhelming. I don't know, like you said, with strategy, I don't know that they really have much of a strategy. They really seem like they're flailing, and the cars themselves are probably fine. Like you read through the details and they're going to be good to drive. The ATS and the CTS are both very good to drive. They lack,
and these are based on the same platform.
Yeah.
It's just an updated version of the
Sigma?
Omega? No, Sigma.
So I think it's Sigma.
Yeah, Omega is the CT6. Yeah, it's Sigma. It's an updated version of the same platform. And in fact,
it's the Alpha.
That's right. It's Alpha. It was Sigma.
Alpha. Sigma was the old one.
Yeah,
right? That's Alpha.
Yeah.
And the CT4 and the ATS both have they have the same wheelbase. It's the same 109.3 inch wheelbase. The ATS is a couple of inches shorter overall, so that you got a little bit more overhang on the CT4. So it should drive pretty similarly.
Yeah, they're going to drive well. The problem that they had was their interiors were crap for the money. And these are going to be V models, right? So they're going to be more expensive than the base models. And I don't know. At least they have Super Cruise available on both of them. That's a plus.
And both of these are using GM's new electrical and electronic architecture on these, what they call their digital vehicle platform, which is going to enable things like over-the-air updates. It's going to, going forward, all of GM's new vehicles are going to adopt this electrical architecture. So it's going to enable OTA updates and faster data transfer speeds in the internal vehicle network, so they can do things like Super Cruise and other functionality on these vehicles.
But I think to Dan's point, it's funny, I was thinking about this, like, are they going to be coming out with some kind of the seat? What is the crossover that just came out?
XT6?
The 4?
Oh,
XT4.
The
XT4. I'm so bad with these alphanumeric crap.
They keep chinging them too.
So the XT4, I drove that again this week at Heels and Wheels, and it's fine. That's the best I could say about it, is that it's fine. But it would be really cool to trick that baby out with an engine like this. And then you've got that nice combination of utility of the SUV that everybody wants with a really fun powertrain. And like, I would love to have that combination instead of just the sedan. And I get that, Steve Carlisle's only been in for a year, but they've got to move faster than what they're moving right now, I think.
Yeah, no doubt. And I think part of the problem is, I think that under Carlisle's predecessor, they kind of went in the wrong direction.
Yes.
And I think that with GM, kind of trying to make a major pivot towards electrification in the coming years, I have this feeling that a lot of things that they were hoping to do have kind of gotten killed. Things that we haven't seen yet that were supposed to happen about now. I think a lot of plans are in flux right now and have been changed at the last minute. So we're probably not seeing some things that Johan probably wanted to do. Just knowing him and given what he is likely to have pushed for, it's unfortunate that I think maybe they should have made the shift towards electrification sooner, because now they're, even with that, they're not going to have something out before at least 2021. So between now and then, they're not going to have any hybrids or plug-in hybrids or battery electric vehicles in the Cadillac lineup, while all of their competitor brands are all moving rapidly in that direction.
Yeah, that seems like a really big blind spot. Even if so, I want to get back to those things that you hinted at. Maybe speculate a little bit more about what Johan might have wanted to do that got killed, but also like instead of these two sort of underwhelming cars, just grab the Bolt and take that hardware and stick it in a Cadillac. At least, but you know what I'm saying? Like get out in front of it a little bit. That seems like a smarter move than cars that don't seem to have a point, and especially when sedan sales are so far underwater compared to where they were.
Yeah, I think a crossover based on the Bolt platform, if that had been available, if that was launching now or launching, in 2019, I think that probably would have been a wiser choice, than some of what they're doing here. Maybe put off the CT4, until maybe sedan sales start to recover a little bit, and do a small electric crossover, because that's something that if they had that launching right now, they would have that segment largely to themselves, because everything else in the premium electric crossover market is bigger than that, and so they would have had a unique offering, and it could have been something very good for them.
Well, think about the popularity of like the Buick Encore, right?
Yeah.
And so you pick up on that. The Encore is not the Bolt, but I am just trying to sort of fit them in.
But it's similar in size.
Right, exactly. And it also was a lot more popular, I think, than they thought it was going to be, because it's a sort of a premium compact crossover, and people really sort of hit it off with that car. And, Cadillac could have that, and they could have that to themselves, like you said, and there's...
Yeah, because Tesla won't have anything in there till at least next year with the Model Y.
Yeah, I don't think the Model Y is ever going to happen, but that's that. I don't know. I mean, it's like that. Well, so the ATS is just like the ATS and the CTS aren't selling. So why would you put any money into sort of replacing them when you could take those resources and go at the areas where you could actually have some sales success? And it's like the XT6 just completely underwhelms me, because all I see in that is a Traverse, and I don't know. So this Cadillac seems to still not really know where they're going. There's not a clear mission, and they don't stand for anything distinctively. Audi is going to be a certain way. That Mercedes and BMW, those are all sort of their identified competitors, and even Lexus, they're all sort of going to be the way they are. We know what to expect from those brands.
And even these new Vs, the kind of the one thing you could expect in the last few years from Cadillac was, at least with the V models, that they were hardcore sports sedans, very high performance vehicles, and these are not. If you're going to change, if you're going to launch, these types of models, at this level of performance, you should have given it a different name. Taking that brand that it had at least developed some familiarity to customers, and then putting that badge on these cars, it just seems foolish.
Yeah, I agree.
What do you think, Rebecca?
I agree completely. I mean, I think that you have to respect these brands, and that's been my claim for a while now. And I also think that even some will say, well, the product plan was already in place and this isn't anything they can do, but then upgrade the marketing, change what you can control, do things like with the XT4, do something more exciting with your crossovers until you have additional product to put into that space. And Dan, as you said, whether you shove in the electric powertrain from the Bolt or whatever you do, just try and do it faster and do it better and change the things you can control right now. Yeah.
When they hand us the reins to Cadillac, we're going to totally sort that out.
Exactly.
So let's just move on to our next topic, which we'll stay in Europe. FCA and Renault have decided they want to try to merge, which they've sort of done in the past once before.
What could possibly go wrong?
I think they should put these companies together. They should call them American Motors,
Or Franco-American Motors?
Yeah, Franco-American, yes. Well, look at it could be worse. It could be Chef Boyardee Motors. Is Francois Castaing still around? Maybe he could come back and teach us how to make cars?
I believe he is off on a well-deserved retirement.
Oh, good for him. But anyway, so FCA doesn't have any cars, really, that are newer than maybe 2005. And Renault has been aggressively looking at electrification, and Europe, in terms of a market, is I think it's tough. There's a lot of players, and there's not a whole lot of profit. And FCA is kind of sitting on a lot of profit with Jeep and Ram, so they're looking at it saying, "Hey, there's some ways we all can work together here." The corporate disgusting word is synergies, but they're trying to figure out how to put the companies together and get ahead of the wave of sort of forced consolidation. It's probably going to happen within the next 15 years in the auto world anyway, as just pressures mount. So it seems like it's something that could happen. The wild card is sort of like Nissan and Mitsubishi that are sort of tacked onto this too. So it's going to get messy.
Rebecca, would you care to take this first?
Sure. So, yeah, it's going to get messy, but I actually like this idea. And the reason I like it is because on a global basis, I think that Renault and FCA at their mainstream brands serves the same customer. And this is a customer that is looking for a durable, reliable, value-oriented vehicle that is darn near close to an appliance sort of feel, in that they're, and I'm not talking about the Maseratis and the Alphas of the world and such. I'm talking about the mainstream widespread consumer. And there's an opportunity for a tremendous amount of economies of scale here. And, when you think about being able to buy all the same wire harnesses or all the same seat frames or things that you can make cosmetic improvements to that the consumer doesn't ever need to know or see or care about. Circuit boards, think how many circuit boards they could buy. And so I think that there's a lot of opportunity here. If, the Daimler Chrysler merger failed because they were not serving the same customer, and Mercedes-Benz buyers did not want to have anything to do with a Chrysler or a Dodge buyer.
Well, I think, that one also, I think what brought that down was sort of management buy-in.
Exactly. But that's because the Mercedes people are sitting in the meeting saying, we don't want this. They weren't serving the same, they weren't building a car for the same type of person. And I think that these brands could build cars for the same, and do build cars for the same type of people. So that's my take on it.
Yeah, so with any merger, I'm concerned about, they've pledged not to close any plants. We'll have to see how that works out. And you've got very strong European unions that they're going to have to deal with in terms of a tie-up. And then there is so with FCA, the Germans came in, and it was not FCA with Daimler Chrysler. The Germans came in and they changed a lot of things. There was less of a, well, how do you do it, Chrysler? Let's look at that. It was, this is how we do it. You must change, kind of thing, and that is so disruptive that
yes,
how the merger is carried out and what that ramp looks like is really going to determine how successful it is or isn't. And so hopefully they understand that, there's going to be this period where you're going to have to sort of let all the business units operate as they had, and you're going to have to carefully look at streamlining, because otherwise you're just going to nuke it, and it's going to be bad.
Well, right. And they can look at where do they have opportunities for synergy, as you love that word.
I hate that word,
but where do they have commonality that they can share expenses? And then also these same consumers, the same customer, I think a lot of them have a similar attitude towards future mobility. And so you can pace yourself on how you're going to come out with electric vehicles, with autonomous vehicles, with some of this, where and how you're going to invest, and the speed with which you need to invest in some of the future mobility that is incredibly, cripplingly expensive, but obligatory. So, Sam, I'd love to get your thoughts on it, too.
Yeah, I think this is a fascinating deal because, from a product standpoint, there's actually remarkably little overlap between what FCA offers and what Renault and its various Renault and Dacia and its divisions
Lada
offer.
Yeah.
So they're actually from an overall product standpoint, they're fairly complementary. FCA, particularly here in North America, you've got trucks and utilities and some minivans and then some the old LHs that have been around forever, they're old Mercedes models basically. And then in Europe, you've got some Fiats that are aging. Those could easily be replaced by Renault platforms. Where they could have a lot of potential combination is on the powertrain side. Renault's done a lot of stuff with electrification, between, as part of the Renault-Nissan alliance, Renault and Nissan have been leaders, particularly in Europe, in electrification. And, the Renault Zoe has been the top selling EV in Europe for many years now. So, I think that Renault can bring a lot in the electrification side to the partnership. And so I think there is potentially a lot of benefit there. Whether, the problem anytime you try to mesh, two big companies is always culture. And it's hard to tell, whether the two corporate cultures will mesh. But, certainly that's the problem you had with Daimler and Chrysler, is the cultures never meshed, that one tried to grind the other one into dust, basically.
Yeah, after they took all their money.
And it didn't work. So, I think that there's a lot of interesting potential here. As you said, Rebecca, the wild card is Nissan and to a lesser degree Mitsubishi. Renault owns a fairly significant equity stake in Nissan. Nissan has a significantly smaller equity stake in Renault. And you've got this alliance, and over the last 8-10 years, the two companies have moved towards commonizing a lot of their platforms. Whether they will continue with that after a merger, if it happens, is a big question. I think that there's potential. When you start to add Nissan into the mix, now you start to have a lot more overlap with the FCA side, especially in North America. And I think that was always one of the fundamental problems when Sergio Marchionne wanted to merge with GM, is there was so much product overlap between Chrysler, the Chrysler brands, the North American Chrysler brands, and GM. And that one, didn't really make as much sense. I think here, this could conceivably work a lot better. But how Nissan plays into it, maybe what ends up happening is, if they merge, maybe they decide that the merged Renault and FCA are large enough and have enough scale that maybe you don't need the alliance anymore, which would be, maybe you start to unwind that. I don't know. Certainly, Nissan has been unhappy with the alliance for quite a long time. So there's a lot of unanswered questions at this point, and whatever happens, it's not going to happen overnight. I mean, we're talking well into 2020 before anything is finalized.
Yeah, on the surface, though.
And it's really okay.
No, go ahead.
No, please go.
I was just going to say, on the surface, it seems like, Chrysler, the cars on the Chrysler side are old, and Fiat kind of too. And investing in new car platforms, especially sedans and electrification, that's possibly smarter to just buy in. And so I can understand where, we've said that, hey, this seems to make sense. Here it does seem to make sense. And so hopefully they can get it done. I don't think there's really any problem sharing a bunch of stuff across multiple brands. It's going to be a real swell name that they're going to have to come up with for all of it. But, I think we've seen that there's enough differentiation between the way they can tune stuff, like the Jeep Renegade and the Fiat 500X are the same thing. But they're different enough. Like if you didn't know that, you wouldn't know that.
Right.
So we can make these things feel different no matter what hardware they're sitting on.
Yeah, I think this makes a lot of sense. And as Sam, as you said, there's not a lot of overlap with Renault and FCA. Obviously, if you look at Nissan and Mitsubishi, that's a different discussion. But I do think that from a strategy standpoint, it's fascinating for Renault because they have had those issues with Nissan. Obviously, the Mr. Goins situation is sub-op as well. And they've got a lot of executive turmoil going on within Nissan. And so, I was on with Richard Quest on CNN International. I compared it to sort of like Sister Wives. Like there's this whole messy, there's this whole messy situation. And Renault is like, hey, look, you know what? You are just too much of a problem for me. I'm going to go someplace else. So
the auto industry version of Big Love.
Exactly. So this is very, very interesting if you are Renault, because suddenly I feel like they've gotten a position of power that they didn't necessarily have within the Renault-Nissan alliance.
That about sums it up. I don't have anything else to add to that. All right, let's hit one more topic before we split. And the thing that's going to screw all of this up are tariffs. Because apparently, while we're on the cusp of signing the USMCA, the New Mexico-Canada NAFTA 2.0 trade deal, we're going to impose up to 25% tariffs, starting at 5% on June 10th. If Mexico doesn't do something about, and they're not even illegal immigrants, they are asylum seekers. This is a topic that sort of crosses the line into the politics side of things, but as we're seeing, cars are political because there's such a big interconnected industry, and the U.S. and Mexico work together to produce the automobiles that we buy here in the North American market for a lot of different brands. And as we're sort of ramping up a trade war with China, a lot of companies were shifting or looking at shifting production to Mexico because it's still lower cost than producing in the U.S. And they also have the workforce and the sort of the base there that we don't necessarily have here currently in the States. It's a global industry. So new tariffs are going to completely screw that all up, potentially, if we can't make that work. And so I don't know what any kind of alliances or car prices or anything else are going to look like in the 6 months.
Yeah, one of the interesting things over the last 10, 15 years has been, there was a lot of discussion of the idea that with the world economy getting more globalized and a lot more interaction, one of the advantages of global trade is that it makes us all more dependent on each other and would hopefully make us less likely to go to war. And what we're seeing right now with all this trade nonsense is, people who don't understand how the economy actually works are, they're trying to do things that are going to get ridiculously complicated because of the way that how interdependent the economy has become. I was reading something the other day, or maybe it was this morning, that the average car in the U.S. Or at some point in the production life cycle of a car, it crosses the U.S.-Mexico border 8 times on average.
Right. So it's going to pay a tariff every single time it crosses. And remember, a tariff
nobody knows.
Right.
Nobody, because the tariffs are not only on the vehicles but on the parts, and so you've got some various subcomponents that get shipped one way or the other across the border, built into something else, and it gets shipped back across the other side of the border to a different plant, further up the supply chain, and then back again. So nobody has any idea how this is actually going to end up working out, and who's going to. The one thing you can probably say for certainty is that consumers will be the ones that pay for it.
Oh yeah. Well, first it's going to be
that's one thing.
The companies building the products, they're paying it, but they're going to pass it on to consumers. And the problem is that a lot of the financial guys are saying, there's no margin for the automakers to actually pass this on to consumers, just given the sort of price pressures.
Yeah, but they can't. So I had somebody contact me on Rebecca Drives, and they sent me a very nasty note. And one of the things, but in their fury, they provided some really interesting information. And one of the things is that they're estimating it will cost $1.6 billion if they were to build a factory in the States. And then, so it's $1.6 billion for the new factory and $1.2 billion in sunk costs in Mexico. And I mean, that kind of, it's $3 billion.
And you're going to staff that factory with whom?
Well, I mean, then you bring it to the States, and that's the crazy thing, right? And you're staffing it with expensive workers as well. So, and the labor intensive stuff that's done in Mexico right now is what should stay in Mexico and make the standard of living. Let's raise the standard of living in Mexico.
Right. And so these are two different problems too. Like it's not a zero sum when you talk about a global economy. And the other thing is if you want to stem the tide of immigration, if that's really like you don't want people coming here from Mexico, then you have to engage in the practice of improving things in Mexico. So that people don't want to leave. And like that, none of this is really the problem that's happening right now. We don't have illegal immigrants like putting pressure on the borders. We have asylum seekers putting pressure on the borders. They're not from Mexico. They're from Central America. So they're crossing Mexico. The problems in Central America is crap that we caused in the 80s when we were tinkering down there. So yes, we have tipped over into the politics side of things, and I hope that we don't get nasty notes about this because we're not really going in depth on it. But it's also like everything's sort of interconnected. If you don't want asylum seekers coming here, then you can't go and script their country and expect that they're not going to leave.
Well, I think, and I think that it's regardless of the pressures on the border and who's putting pressures on the border. Tariffs are not the answer. And that's the number one thing, is especially tariffs with one of our trading partners from decades. I mean, we've been trading partners for decades.
Yeah.
And it's not that NAFTA shouldn't be revisited. It just shouldn't be revisited like this. It's ridiculous.
It's so no matter what you do with a trade deal, Mexico's still going to be there. They're not moving. They're on our southern border.
We're not a flexible industry. We are not an industry that can just say, oh, hey, let's just go build this someplace else. And it's nobody's going to win with this ridiculous tariff thing.
Well,
there's too much infrastructure involved in manufacturing, all the way up and down the supply chain to just instantaneously move it one place or another.
Yeah. Right. Well, so the thing that the auto industry hates and manufacturing in general, and then also so the financial side of things is the uncertainty. And like you're saying, Stephen, like we just don't know. And probably because it hasn't been well thought out. It's a reactionary move. And this, you want to talk about how the economy and not really the economy as a whole, but the stock market indicators that everybody looks at to say the economy is booming, which is not exactly the same thing. If you want to stall that, you're doing a pretty good job when you start throwing tariffs around at everyone because, tariffs are paid by U.S. citizens and consumers, not by Mexico. Mexico's not paying them. China's not paying them. It's making the goods.
It's basically a tax.
Yeah, it's more expensive for us, and it does have the effect of sort of putting a chilling effect on those purchases, right? So yes, if you want to adjust consumer behavior, it's a tool, but it's not exactly the best tool to be using, and it's certainly not going to sway China or Mexico so much when they're not really seeing any economic hit from it, and there's not really a whole lot stopping Mexico from working with China that has a very large population of consumers as well. So you're not, I don't know. There's a lot of variables here, and you start to kick the bee's nest and get stung.
Yeah. I mean, Nariman Baravesh from IHS Markit, who I used to work with, he's an amazing economist. And he and I were talking, this was last year when the tariffs discussion was embroiled as well. And, he just said it's one of the worst things that you can do to an economy. It's basically a tax on consumers. It's just going to raise prices. It's not going to solve any problems that you think it's going to solve. And it's a terrible, terrible idea.
It would be one thing if there were, if there was dumping going on, and there had been in steel. Back a few years ago, there was steel dumping from China. That I think they did use tariffs to sort of curtail that. But we don't have replacements for those factories here domestically. We're not an isolationist manufacturing country any longer. So that it's going to hurt us. And we've said enough about it to get everybody riled up. So I'm going to stop. But I don't know, Sam, do you have any sort of wrap ups on that?
Nah, I'm good.
Yeah, I think that it's important. I will say this. We are not discussing this as a political matter. We are discussing this as an industry issue. And the bottom line is the industry issue is that this is not going to help the industry, and it's only going to hurt the industry and the people that work there and the people that are employed by this industry. There.
All right.
Yeah.
That's perfect.
Prices are going to go up, sales are going to go down, and a lot of people are going to end up getting laid off.
Exactly. And
the people that were nominally supposed to be helped by this will end up losing their jobs.
That's been a pattern. I will just lay that out there. And I think with that, unless we've got anything else to talk about, there was a question, Sam. Is this a fresh question, or is this one that was just... It
was one that we had that we didn't get to previously from John Wilson on Twitter. Let's see, what are the pros and cons of modern turbocharged powertrains? For example, Honda Civic's 1.5 liter turbo has similar horsepower and torque to Mazda 3's 2.5 liter naturally aspirated. How would you pick between the two? Fuel efficiency, reliability, fun. In terms of fuel efficiency is a tough one when you start looking at these turbos. It depends a lot on how you drive them. One of the advantages, modern turbocharged engines tend to have direct fuel injection, which mitigates a lot of the issues we've had in the past with turbocharged engines. Because when you inject the fuel directly into the cylinder, it has a charge cooling effect, so it tends to avoid knock and things like that. So you can run higher compression, which makes the engine more efficient, and also improves low and mid-range torque, and really improves the drivability. We happen to own a Honda Civic with the 1.5 turbo. Very happy with it. The 2.5. If you look at the peak power and torque numbers, they're comparable. But the Mazda engine has less low and mid-range torque than the turbo does. So you're going to give off some of that. On the other hand, if you drive it hard and you're into the boost all the time, then you start to see some degradation in fuel economy, because it is going to use more fuel in that case. And so a lot of times a larger displacement naturally aspirated in real world driving, depending on what your driving style is, can end up giving you better fuel economy. So it depends a lot on how you use it. But overall, obviously a turbo is a more complex engine. There's more things to potentially go wrong. But for the most part, modern turbos are have gotten pretty good as far as durability and reliability. They've overcome a lot of the issues we had back in the early days in the 80s and the early 90s.
Yeah, turbos are definitely more reliable than they used to be. The worst I've had with turbos is just some oil leaks that you can easily solve. They're not expensive time bombs like they once were. I have found them to be rather thirsty the way I drive.
Like I said, it all comes down to to technique.
Yeah.
On what your behavior is. I mean, if you drive it hard, it will use more fuel.
Yeah, and the modern turbos are great. They have very, very flat torque curves. So basically, you get max torque at low RPM, and it just stays there, which is not something that used to be the case. Turbos used to have a lot of lag, and you wouldn't get any appreciable boost until you got up there on the tack. So they're a lot different now than they used to be. I'd have no problem buying a turbo engine. I just, you do have to understand if you're going to beat the hell out of it all the time, it's going to drink like a 3-liter, not like a 1.5.
Yeah.
All right. So I hope we've helped him make a purchase decision. From there, we've done a pretty solid podcast. We covered all the bases. We should get some good feedback, I hope.
And by good, we mean positive.
Yes.
Yeah.
And if you have positive things to say about the show, let us know. And also, give us a rating somewhere on iTunes or wherever you happen to get your podcasts from. And tell your friends about it.
Did you say that iTunes is going away?
Probably. That's the rumor. iTunes, as we've known it, is probably going away. I think tomorrow. Yeah, tomorrow's the keynote at the Apple Worldwide Developers Conference, and they'll be making some announcements. But it'll be replaced by a dedicated podcast app, much as they have on the iPhone.
Okay, good. That makes me feel better.
They're taking think of iTunes as kind of the computer equivalent of the automotive electrical system over the last 30 years, where we've just every time we want a new feature, we'll just throw it in iTunes, or we'll just throw another ECU in the car, and next thing you know, you got 100 electronic control units in the car, and iTunes is kind of like that. They just throw it in iTunes, and so now they're going to try and break it back up again and provide dedicated functions.
Yeah.
Okay. That makes me feel
It'll be better.
Thank you.
It'll be better.
It's always fun.
iTunes was never good. So whatever they do.
Back in the very early days, in like 2001, 2002, when they first started, when they took sound, they bought Sound Jam and turned it into iTunes. It was probably the best music management tool at the time. It was good for what it was, and but it had very limited functionality, but it did it very well. And then they added more stuff to it and more stuff to it. Well, I've already said that part. So.
And the UI never got better. It always got worse. So
yeah.
Oh, good. We'll have something to complain about next time. We'll be back sooner than this time with another podcast. So in the meantime, let us know how we did, and we'll see everybody soon.
All right. See ya.
Cheers. Bye.